Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. As I was introduced, my name is Sandra Guerra. I'm the North America lead for Consumer Science and Product Understanding for GSK Consumer Healthcare.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cesar Castillo, so I am a Consumer Insights Analyst at ATCS and Cultural Anthropologist.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking to you about work that we did at GSK with the ATCS team to deeply understand consumers, Hispanic and African Americans consumers in US. Next slide, please. I don't have the thing.
Right here.
Do you want to change it?
Okay. I didn't click here.
Yeah, you're in charge. Anyway, so what was I saying? Yes, nowadays consumers are more demanding, more and more. One size doesn't fit all. They're looking for experiences that address their specific needs. To achieve this, you really need to understand what similarities and differences do they have, what are their unique tensions and barriers. And to do this, in this research, what we did was take social media as the main source of data, and with this, learn about the Hispanic and African American consumer in terms of wellness, right? And this through the lens of culture and social trends. And with these learnings, create and hopefully guide our R&D development labs to create holistic product experiences. Wellness is a whole, and we will see that in a minute.
Cool.
So now we're going to pass it to Cesar so that he can walk us through what was the approach taken to do this, to achieve this.
All right, guys. So I think it started working, which is great, right? So I'm going to be talking a little bit about approach, methodology, and what we actually do at ATCS and how we were able to team up with GSK to really deliver something that I think is truly spectacular, right? So digital social insights or social digital insights, we kind of use those interchangeably. What is it? Well, Sandra comes to us with this tall order. Okay, we need to understand the African American and Hispanic cohorts in the United States in the wellness space. And we're like, okay, well, let's do it. So holistic is the key word. When we're thinking about digital social insights, what we're thinking about is proactive insights. So what's reactive and what's proactive? Well, reactive insights is campaign monitoring, tracking. That's when you gotta use social listening, for example, to find out, well, what are they saying about my brand, right? What about when you're learning about a group of people? What about when you're understanding the cultural tensions, that deep part of every one of us that makes us who we are, that differentiates us from one another? I'm Hispanic. Some here are African American. We come from all these backgrounds, right? Digital social insights is holistic. There's 3 pillars to what we do at ATCS, and one of them is our digital tools, right? We use digital tools like, for example, social listening, brand watch, which you might be familiar with, to understand one part of the conversation, right? And when we think about social listening, like I said, we typically think about these kind of very overview sentiment things, right? Social media is a window into the minds of consumers. Why? Because every minute we're tweeting, we're posting on Facebook, right? These posts are a way that we openly give our thoughts to the world, and we can harness them to better understand what's going on in the mind of consumers, right? So that's one of them. Another one of them is AI-assisted tools, right? So we're big, ATCS is a technology company. We're big on digital tools, on these things that enable us to go further, deeper in our qualitative research. And then the last thing, me being an anthropologist, is these theories, methods that are so at the center of qualitative research, right? That we're so obsessed with here, right? And together, we have proactive insights. We're not here trying to do reactive, this is what they're saying. No, we want to understand the why. Why are consumers the way they are? Why do they think the way they do? That's digital social insights. Next slide. You got the clicker. All right, so then Sandra comes with us with this tall order. Okay, let's understand this cohort. And I'm like, let's do it. All right, so I want to tell you guys something. We're all ethnographers here, right? Because we're all, social researchers to an extent, right? So let's just put our ethnographer hat on. There's 2 different things here. Ethnographic gaze, what I like to call ethnographic gaze, and the ethnographic lens. The ethnographic gaze is the way that we see people. Because remember, qualitative insights is all about people, human-centric insights. It is the way that we look at people and make our assumptions from them. So in our methodology at ATCS, we start with the ethnographic gaze, understanding some things that we're going to be talking about more in this presentation, such as cultural ecologies. Where do people's beliefs, core beliefs, identity come from? That's step 1. Generational framework, as we know, generations are a big part of what we do. We have Gen X, Gen Z. Gen Zs are kind of annoying, but then we have millennials, right? So generational analysis, how are each one of these age groups, even within these cultural cohorts, these ethnic cohorts, how are they different? How do they perceive differently? How do they experience differently? How do they love differently? Very important. That's our ethnographic gaze. Now, what about ethnographic lens? This is when we have the data in front of us. How do we interpret it, right? Big part of this is digital social insights, right? What is it that they're telling us from social media, from SEO, from reviews? That's so essential, right? We take this, and this is the data in front of us, how we view it, the glasses we put on that gives us that 3D vision. And then also holistic consumer life stages, right? Understanding, like I said, the generations. How things change once we have the data on the generations. How do we visualize them? How do we bring them to life in that 3D way? Remember that the key point here in this presentation today is building holistic consumer journeys. And this is the step-by-step guide to that roadmap. Next slide. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about methodology, right? Because I'm a methodology nerd. We have these two different cohorts, right? That we wanted to analyze in depth using all of our tools at our disposal, right? As for the Hispanic market, we know that they use Spanish and Spanglish, right? Español para lo que es hablan español aquí, right? So linguistics is a big part of what we do. You know, segmenting by language. How about segmenting by location, by geography? How do you get to the core? We're talking about historically black college universities, right? How do we get to the core of understanding the African American communities? By looking at the communities. Geography is another way to segment data. We segment it by geography, by language, more than just keywords. Really bringing social listening to a whole new level of depth, right? So that's one thing we did. We also supplemented it with in-depth interviews. And here on the slide, you can see some of our partners in doing this. Brand Watch for social listening, Visions Live. These guys are all out there, you know. They got a little booth next to ours. These guys, their tools have helped us also, right? So we leverage many tools, not just one, in order to better understand these cohorts holistically. So we merge social listening, AI-assisted tools, IDIs. We use NVivo to code the IDIs. You know, we use all these tools, all these perspectives in order to better, in a more deeper way, understand these narratives. Like I said earlier, these posts are a window into the mind of consumers. We go even further than that. Next slide. All right, so have you guys ever read The Fourth Turning? Raise your hand if you read The Fourth Turning. No one's read The Fourth Turning? See, this is why I say I'm a total nerd. Okay, The Fourth Turning is the book that established what we know today as generations. These two guys, about 40, 50 years ago, you guys should read this, great book. They establish what generations are in the United States, and they establish the cycle of generations. Generations are cycles. They really are. And when I say that we take a holistic perspective at ATCS, we look at these theoretical perspectives and apply them and plug them into these tools and our methodologies in order to better and more holistically understand these cohorts, right? So while we're looking at African Americans, while we're looking at Hispanics, we're also understanding what are the differences among the age groups, right? As we know, in this cycle, we had the 2008 crisis that has shaped the millennials, right? Now we have a whole other crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic, huh? And that's shaped not only the perceptions of millennials, but the Gen Zs. What about Generation Alpha? When we think about proactive insights, we're not thinking about the insights of what's going on today. We're thinking about what's going on today and how it's going to affect the consumer of tomorrow, right? So when we look at the generation in terms of cycles, when we look at them in terms of what are the things in society that are affecting their perceptions of wellness and self, and what constructs their identity, now we're talking digital social insights. Next slide. Cool, so Sandra and I are going to tag team this one. When we're talking about holistic journeys, this is what we're talking about. This is called cultural ecologies. Let's start with the ancestral landscape. I'm Hispanic, some African Americans here. We all come from somewhere, right? When you're constructing your holistic journey, think about that. Where does this person come from? Where is at the core of their identity that constructs every aspect of why they consume such and such product? Why do they take this multivitamin, for example, right? So let's talk about ancestral landscape. As we know, if you're Hispanic and you come from Latin America, you have fruits and vegetables readily available. You think about also about what's healthy for you, right? We live in a tropical climate. If you're African American, you're all about a specific diet that's specific to African Americans as well, right? There's different things that you consider healthy, right? So when we teamed up with GSK, we started big picture, holistic. Where do we start? We start with the cultural ecology, with the ancestral landscape of these different cohorts. That's how we can get to at the core of their identity that defines their consumption, defines their perception. You want to add a little bit
And
to that?
with this, of course, comes identifying some tensions and pain points for these cohorts, right? There are two main ones in general, of socioeconomical, unfortunately, but also the change of the diet. As Cesar was mentioning, they came from a natural food and then turning into this processed food, which is affecting their overall health, right? So this leads to a perception of more connecting wellness with a natural source, with a natural experience, which is what they're looking for. So this generates certain opportunities that we're able to identify and leverage later on for our innovation pipelines. Left this guy here, so let's go to the next one. So here is something interesting in terms of the, well, okay, I'll do this ultra fast. The wellness wheel. So pretty much the wellness wheel, what is interesting here is to see wellness for consumers is not just one thing. It's not about taking your vitamins every day. It's a mix of many, many, many things and different aspects. And what's very interesting to identify some differences between these ethnicities. For example, for Hispanics, and I'm Hispanic as well, but for Hispanics, for us, social wellness is super important. Family, community, we connect. That's where we get our energy from. In African Americans, also is important, but if we see here, it's a little bit lower in the wheel. Meanwhile, in the African American community, the spiritual wellness is a little bit more higher in the ranks. So that's quite important as well. If we move next, also, it's important to understand how this, the experience, the expected experience, and the products and the benefits, claims, all of these things that make a holistic product experience changes over time with life stages. You really need to get that differences, not only in Hispanic versus African American, but how that evolves over time for each one of these cohorts. That's important. So what? What do we do with this? So when you're able to understand what's the difference, similarities and differences between general population, Hispanic, African American, and we saw that through the Pepsi presentation as well, you really are able to take into account things like habits, benefits, product experience, ingredients, things that are really unique for each one of these ethnicities and can help this information to guide the product development labs to come up with products that are relevant for them. So when the consumer sees something in the market that this is for me, they're talking to me, they understand me, we expect that will generate brand loyalty and really get them pretty much connected to us. So I will wrap it up. Cesar, do you want to wrap it up?
So yeah, Sandra and I and the team, we've been working on this project, and it's been a spectacular journey in ourselves, uncovering, getting to know these cohorts better, getting to know at the core of their identity. And as Sandra said in the beginning, there's no one-size-fits-all solution, as we know, right? When we're talking about product development or market research, when we're talking about implementation, it's important to understand the consumer holistically. And that's what we're here for today. So if you guys have any more questions, you guys check out our booth. Of course, got to put that plug in there. My name is Cesar, and that's Sandra, and we're here for you guys throughout the conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Any questions?
Any questions? I don't know if we have time for questions. Probably no.
No questions. You got one? Anybody else? All right, we're going to kick it off with you.
Hi, that was great. Thank you very much. This type of research that compares cohorts tends to always focus on the differences between them. Did you find commonalities that were worth exploring?
Yes, definitely we did. And of course, all of this is confidential information, so we won't be able to share further details. But yes, and that's really great because you can identify opportunities that could travel across ethnicities, which is great, but also identify differences that really had them to make more tailored to specific targets.
Yes.
So yes, the short answer is yes.
Yes, and cross-generational, right? There's certain things that cross-generational are evident, and that just validates and supports the research we do.
Well, I have a question
Tell
for
me
y'all.
what's
Look
up.
at me,
Yeah,
having
bring it on.
questions. All right. So when I was briefly at a place that shall not be named, don't look at my LinkedIn, I will see y'all. But I did a study that never got launched, but it was talking about how different ethnicities, depending on geography, which you spoke about earlier, they changed what they identify with. So for example, some black people, like myself, just call me black. I don't like BIPOC, I don't care too much, POC, all that stuff. So I saw that with black people, in certain regions, they preferred being called Black. Some were African American. Some were, if they were African, like actually African, it was more, okay, I'm a Nigerian American. Since you both are Hispanic, possibly from different regions or
Yes.
countries, could you elaborate more on how we may be able to better understand kind of what type of Hispanic, for lack of better words? Have you all maybe done that through different demographic questions, through the analysis or anything like that?
You want me to take a stab at that?
Yes, I can complement. Go ahead.
Perfect. It's actually a great question, right? Because there's no one face of Blackness. There's not one face of Hispanic, right?
Yep.
And what's great about our approach is that we look at it exactly like that. Of course, we're trying to uncover general trends in terms of actionability for our client. We want to say what those predominant differences and similarities are. But we need to be inclusive of those differences. Otherwise, it's not relevant, right? Yes,
And I would say, and connecting the previous question, yes, similar as an African Americans, Hispanics were different, right, between regions. I mean, Latam is very big, so definitely it's very different cultures and nuances in each one of them, right? But at the end of the day, there are some commonalities, some values and fundamentals that they stay across the board. And when you can leverage on those, definitely there is an opportunity there. Yes, there are some differences, but the fundamentals, the principle, family, community, all of these big values, fundamental values, stay same across. So that's where you can leverage on those opportunities as well.
Yeah.
Anybody else have a question? All right,
Oh,
in the
in the
back, to the back left, if
got it.
someone in the back can give him a mic.
Sure, we can hear you, I guess.
Oh, we got a mic coming over that way.
That's more better.
Hmm.
No, it's still didn't work.
It's not working, the mic. No.
I can hear you. If you say your question, I'll repeat it as best as possible, as long as it's not a dissertation question.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. I sound like the Verizon guy now. So my name is Yogesh Chavda. I work for WS Audiology. Like you were describing the African American Black differences across the country, and you were mentioning Hispanics. The same also applies obviously for the Asian community as well. You know, because we lump almost like 80 countries under Asian, and there are significant differences obviously across all that, right? So, are there any learnings that you have about the Asian community? I'm just curious.
It wasn't in scope for this project. But regardless, in ATCS, one of our specialties is decoding the tensions, the barriers of each one of these ethnic groups, right? So, but in this project, it wasn't in the scope of the project.
From GSK point of view, I mean, at this moment, we started, GSK is a very consumer-centric culture, right? And that's at the core of our culture, pretty much. So at this moment, we started with African American Hispanics, looking at the census data and all of this. Definitely, Asian American are very important as well, so that could be in the next phase of this.
Awesome. That was a really good question. We definitely don't
Very
want to forget
similar
anybody.
question.
Okay, let's do one more, and then we'll
Questions,
wrap it
I
on
love.
up.
I love questions.
Me too.
Have you guys found any differences when you start to integrate the two Hispanics and Blacks together? Do you find that
Yes.
they tend to shift more to one side than the other, or they pretty much, what are the differences? Just wondering.
The specific differences, yes, we identify. Again, I mean, I cannot go too much in detail because this is part of confidential data. So, but definitely we were able to identify. For example, what we were showing in terms of the wellness wheel, where you could see how priorities among each one of the ethnicities varies. That doesn't mean it's not important. It's just they put some more weight on ones versus others, right? But when you're thinking on developing a product, a holistic product experience, you need to consider all of this and understand what's more relevant for them, what is less, because that's going to define how you communicate the product, what type of ingredients you put, I mean, how you create the right communication and the right experience for it.
Yeah.
So, and you could leverage into those differences that has been identified, and also in the similarities as well.
Yeah, and as Sandra mentioned in the wellness wheel, it's really fascinating because in the overview, minorities, one would assume, have a lot of similarities. But when you really dig deep, they're very different. And that's at the core of why, of the why, you know? So yeah, they're very different in some ways.
Well, that's y'all's mic drop. I'm not going to drop these people's mic because I'm not going to pay for it. So thank you so much, y'all. That was awesome.